Hi, this is Greg Kesich. I'm the editorial page editor at the Portland Press Herald, and I'm here with part of the Sunday crew. I have Alan Caron and Cynthia Dill. We don't have Bill today, Bill Nemitz, but that's okay because we have a lot we want to say, so there's more space for the rest of us.
There's more room for the rest of us. Yeah.
So, James Comey was fired this week, and I guess maybe I would like to start it out, just go around and get people's reaction. Is this a big deal or not?
I think it's a big deal. I think it's a great thing. I'm glad he was fired, and I thought the timing was perfect.
Really?
Really.
I thought it was the most awkward, immature action that this administration could take.
So there we go.
Well, let's start out with that. So, Cynthia, why do you think it was a great thing?
James Comey should have been fired when he usurped the Attorney General's role and announced that the Justice Department was not going to prosecute Hillary Clinton, and then he sort of made these gratuitous, derogatory remarks about her being careless or whatever his words were. I thought that it violated FBI policy. Everyone was sort of in agreement about that. And then he should have been fired again when he came out and announced that he was investigating President Trump and made comments about the truthfulness or lack of it of Trump's tweets, because the FBI is not supposed to comment publicly on investigations. And we had an FBI director, on TV all the time, showboating. And 2 weeks ago, Rosenstein was confirmed by the United States Senate on a 96-4 vote. He had bipartisan support. He served in the Obama administration. He served in George Bush's administration. And he concluded that the FBI director not only, violated FBI policy, but that he refused to admit that he had done wrong and recommended that he be canned. And on that very day, he got canned, and I'm glad.
But it wasn't 2 weeks ago. That letter came in on Tuesday, the same day that he was canned.
Rosenstein was confirmed about 2 weeks ago.
Right.
So this is a guy who has the trust of 96 United States senators and 2 administrations, and he did. He came to the conclusion that Comey should be fired, and I think he should have been fired, as I said, a long time ago.
Right, but he wasn't fired a long time ago. He wasn't fired.
So that doesn't mean he should never be fired.
Well, if the question is should he be fired, I think there's no disagreement. He should not be the director of the FBI. And if the question is this replacement better? Sure. Anybody would be better. What struck me, though, was that they waited all of this while, and apparently a few days after Comey asked for more money for the Russian investigation, they fire the guy. It just seems stupid, incredibly stupid to me. Now they've got all this conversation happening in Congress that really wasn't happening about an independent prosecutor or a new bipartisan commission or something. They elevated the issue. I think the American public doesn't think this thing will ever get figured out anyway by Congress. So I can't believe they were so inept to not fire him or not, months ago.
I guess, though, but I mean, this is the first time that that I'm aware of that somebody with the credentials and chops, like this Rosenstein guy, who, like I said, has the backing of both parties, had put to paper what Comey's infractions were and the belief that with him in the Bureau of Investigation that it did not have the confidence of the public or the institutions to do its job. And I just think, it's never good timing when you're going to have a dramatic firing of somebody who, Comey threw the election for Clinton, and now he was fired by Trump. That guy is toxic. And the longer he's in, the more we pay. And I'm glad, like I said, the timing thing, he deserves a spontaneous and inconvenient sacking. His timing was pretty poor, in my view, 11 days before the election to come out and decide to make these grandiose announcements.
It's funny, the way you describe it, it makes it sound like Donald Trump didn't play any role in this at all.
Oh, I'm sure he did.
I'm sure he was about 99% of it. How do you say his name? Rosenstein?
I think it's Rosenstein, but I'm not sure.
That letter seems like a post facto argument after Trump had decided to get rid of Comey. And the chain of events that's the chain of events that's led to the firing was Sally Yates testifying on Monday. Apparently, Comey testifying last week with the Judiciary Committee. Back in March, Comey saying that, as you said, he acknowledged that there was an investigation, but he also said that there was nothing to the president's claims that he had been wiretapped. And these are the kind of things that were, but by the counts in the New York Times and the Washington Post, and apparently everybody in the White House is leaking, or let me put it this way, half the people seem to be leaking in the White House all of the time. Either whether your side is up or down depends on whether or not you have something to say. But there's a lot of information coming out of the White House that Trump was infuriated with, sort of personal slights by Comey. And I think Alan is right. I think he elevated this Russia investigation into something that's probably a lot greater than what I'm expecting them to come up with. I mean, I think a very realistic outcome could be that they look into the Russia involvement in the election and decide that Russia does what it always did. It upped its game a little bit this time around. It caught people by surprise. They were more interested in hurting Clinton than they were in helping Trump, and they didn't really need to collude with anybody to do that. And it all depends on who delivers that message. And right now, I don't know who's credible in Washington, who can deliver that message and say, we looked into it, there was nothing wrong.
Well, I guess I'm not as cynical about Rod Rosenstein. I mean, if you think every single person who's going to articulate an opinion and that the president relies on his opinion, it's cynical. Of course Trump played a role in it. I'm sure Trump did feel personally slighted. I'm sure that there's a lot of factors. But the bottom line is, if you believe that the FBI director should not be the FBI director, and if you believe, like I do, that he is not the right person to lead any investigation, every single thing that he's done that you just listed he should not be commenting on the veracity of what the president says. I mean, he set himself up. He's the wrong guy for the job. So the question for me now is, so what's next? I think this idea of a special prosecutor is equally silly. I think we need a new FBI director that's going to be confirmed by a majority in the Senate, and that's the special prosecutor that we need, somebody who instills confidence in President Trump to do a fair job in the Senate and in the House and in the American public.
I'm imagining what's going on in the White House here. I don't think this had anything to do with Comey. I think it had to do with the investigation that the FBI is pursuing on Russia, which Trump, I believe, wants stopped. And he will try to stop it in any way he can. That's why I think this was a stupid move. If you think you're going to stop the investigation by firing Comey, who, by the way, was scheduled to testify to Congress the next day, that's just idiocy, I think, because now Congress and the FBI have to prove that no action by Trump has thwarted or diminished the investigation. So in a sense, it's counterproductive. So I agree with you on everything you said about Comey, but I don't think that's why they fired him. I don't think that has, if they were going to fire him for those things, I mean, the idea that they're firing him because he mishandled the Hillary Clinton email stuff is absurd.
I think if you read the memo, it's not just that they mishandled the Hillary Clinton email stuff. They mishandled it on such a level that it impacted the election of the United States president. And then
if they believed that, they would have fired him the first day in office.
No, but the memo from Rosenstein came out the day that Comey was fired. So it was Rosenstein who, using his legal analysis and his expertise as an investigator, put together this memo that I thought was compelling.
Yeah,
I
think it's cover. I think that's entirely.
He had said there's a lot in those tweets that I think makes a lot of sense. They could have written the best memo in the world, and he would still have a job. I
guess my point is, I don't care what Donald Trump's motivation is. Honestly, I don't believe that he actually is trying. He thinks that he's going to stop the investigation by the FBI. I really don't. I think that he hated Comey and thought he was a showboat, which he was, and was sick of seeing his face on television. He gets this memo. The memo looks good. It's from a guy who everybody likes. he fires him. And like I said, I mean,
and he said today he was going to fire Comey. Nobody had to tell him.
Right.
So he's already displacing his own story on why the firing is. But time will tell.
Yeah.
And I believe this is part of a pattern of trying to shut down the Russia investigation. My own inclination is there's more there. There's potentially explosive information.
Oh, I agree.
And that's the thing that scares the heck out of them. And they've got the subpoenas just issued for Flynn. I mean, so all of this wraps into this accelerating investigation, and so we'll be able to tell over time. But I think this isn't the last effort they'll make to squash the investigation or to limit it.
Well, because that investigation right now is happening in the Senate Intelligence Committee, and Maine has, I believe, the only state that's got both of its senators sitting on that committee, and both of them are facing kind of unique pressures. Let's pick them off one by one. What about Senator Collins? How do you think she's handling this?
You know, I think she's pretty far out there from the Republican perspective, and I think she's going to be further out there. Of course, she's also out there on health care, so the two things have to play together from her perspective. But I think, again, this timing is so weird. There are like 10 major Republicans now who have said publicly, I don't buy any of these rationales for the timing of this firing. So I think Susan Collins is going to get caught up in it, and I think she'll end up joining Angus King and calling for a special counsel or a special prosecutor, one or the other. I'll be surprised if she doesn't.
I actually, there's no statute that enables Congress to appoint a special prosecutor. I think if Congress could actually get its act together and pass a law that gave them authority to do so, it would be a miracle, and we're not going to see that miracle happen. And I just don't see how another personality injected to what is already a very dramatic Washington is necessary. Like, it all depends on who Trump appoints as the next FBI director. I mean, if he appoints somebody who we agree is fair and is the special prosecutor, I mean, why do we need somebody?
But we're not going to agree on that.
But how can we agree? Then who's going to agree on a special prosecutor if there was this magic?
It would be the Deputy Attorney General would have to appoint somebody, and he could appoint somebody that's outside of his office. Now, I agree with you. If he hadn't been named Deputy Attorney General, he's probably the kind of person that you'd want to name. But a retired federal judge, somebody with bipartisan background that doesn't look like they're, got a dog in the fight. Because right now you're looking at an FBI director who was picked by Trump will issue findings to a deputy attorney general who was picked by the president, who was overseen by somebody who was recused from the investigation. I mean, why would anybody? The problem, I think, is that lots of people are not going to believe the outcome, regardless of who does it. But I think they want to put as much credibility as possible. And right now, the Trump administration has no credibility because of the guy at the top. And I think that's the position that Susan Collins is in. Is not that she doesn't trust Rosenstein, because she does, but how does she help create a process that a large number of people will accept the outcome?
I don't know why people think that there's going to be this great faith in some special prosecutor. I mean, when in recent past have we had a special prosecutor that has done anything good? I mean, you look at Ken's what. Well, I said recent past. To me, that's a little bit. I mean, sure, Watergate. Everybody wants to pin this like Watergate.
What about
but it's
the
not.
Scooter Libby prosecution?
I just feel like in this instance, we need the Republicans to step up to the plate, and they can do that in the confirmation process of a new FBI director. There is an investigation. I'm not saying forever. I'm just saying that right now, if everybody agrees Comey should have been fired, okay, he's been fired. So now then what? What next? Do we need an FBI director and a special? So the whole nation is going to get distracted appointing an FBI director and the special counsel. When what we really need to do is have the FBI, who is doing the investigation now, to continue to do its work, and the Senate Intelligence Committee to continue to do its work. It's going to be this big distraction about another personality.
So do you think Susan Collins should come out and say that?
I think she's been wise to keep her powder dry. I mean, it's there's no reason to rush to judgment about. I think, for instance, Angus King's middle of the night kind of, wow, this is a cool idea, we should have Comey, is just foolish. I mean, that's the level of dialogue that I think we don't need. We need people to sort of wait and see. And like I said, I think Republicans are the ones who are really in the hot seat in terms of making this a process that people feel confident in. And whether it's a new FBI director or a special counsel or whatever, I personally would see no reason to have this big bureaucratic sideshow when we have the tools in place and we haven't yet tested them to see if in this instance it can be done.
No, the purpose of the original act that came out of Watergate was, it seems to me, to respond to the sense that an administration cannot forcefully investigate itself. And that's the problem here. I mean, we were talking about an administration doing an investigation and having confidence that that administration will not put its thumb on the scales.
Right.
And that administration just fired the guy who was in charge of the investigation a few days after he said, it's getting bigger, I need more money.
Yeah, and
so rather than saying, yes, here's the money, that was the first thwarting. They have not agreed to the additional funding. Instead, they fired the guy who asked for it. Those are conditions that make it hard, I think, for Americans to believe that this administration can investigate itself.
The thing about the money, though, first of all, I mean, this notion that Jim Comey went into somebody's office and said, hey, I need some money for an investigation. I personally think Comey's smart enough that he has been setting himself up so he could not be fired. I think the reason why he went in the press and made these comments about Trump's tweets and doing all this stuff is to protect himself and to insulate himself, and Trump called him out. But as far as this law that they passed after Watergate, Congress let it repeal because they saw that it wasn't doing any good. And so now we have...
Well, they abused the law.
They abused the law, and so now it's not there.
They used it, but the original idea that in a what amounts to a constitutional crisis, which this could rise to, you have to take extraordinary action.
I agree.
And so that's the Watergate analogy. In that case, it's not the 50 different investigations and special prosecutors they had for Bill Clinton and the Clinton administration. But back to the Watergate case, there was an instance where you need extraordinary, exceptional independence. So how do you get it? In that case, the judges oversaw the independent. So it was even taken out of the legislative.
So I want to get back to our other senator, Angus King.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Who, if Susan Collins is under intense pressure, I'm looking at him on TV, and he just looks as loose as can be. Like you said, he's just taking, spitballing ideas that make absolutely no sense. Yeah, let's hire one of the witnesses to be a special investigator for this investigation, and
yeah.
And he just seems very, very relaxed and not didn't look very worried about where this is headed. I mean, should we take anything out of that? Does he see more of this intelligence than we have?
He's got a lot of confidence in the Senate Intelligence Committee investigation too. I don't, and I don't think most of the American public does. And the recent polling is 75% or more of the American public says, I don't believe Congress can do this. I don't know what the answer is when you ask, do you think the Trump administration can do it? I suspect it's even lower.
But see, I don't think that the public is going to accept that there's anyone who meets this independence, like pie in the sky threshold that everybody wants to think there is, that there's this big daddy out there who's the honest, straight broker who's going to resolve all the problems and, pat all our heads and make us be America.
Can we
again.
get better than 25% believability?
I just think that we need Congress to do this. And I think Angus King is probably feeling really relaxed because he knows he's not going to have a real big job in any of this because it's going to be up to this small group of moderate Republicans and Democrats to come together and figure out how this system that we have is going to deal with Donald Trump. And I believe at this point that there has been I've predicted early on that there would be collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. So it's not that I don't think that there's evidence there. I just think that there hasn't been a smoking gun yet, and the FBI is perfectly equipped without James Comey to continue that investigation, that we need somebody at the top of that department who has buy-in from both parties in a confirmation process, that has buy-in from the executive branch in a nomination process, and that's how we rebuild trust. I think this idea that we're going to find somebody, this independent counsel is like an independent senator. It's like, it doesn't really mean anything. It really doesn't. Nobody thinks that Angus King is independent, right? He's a Democrat for the most part. He likes to call himself independent. That's his brand, but he's not any more independent than Susan Collins, and any investigator that's chosen, if they're just given the label independent, the public's not going to believe it. People are too cynical.
You know, I think you're forgetting some successful prosecutions by special prosecutors, and the one I keep coming back to is the one under the Bush administration of the Valerie Plame case, and it was a highly regarded U.S. attorney from I can't remember his name, from the Midwest, and he had been appointed by a Democratic president, and he was just a real stickler and ran a really clean, transparent investigation and cleared most of the people that the political kibitzers thought were behind the leak, like Karl Rove. And it came down to Scooter Libby lying to investigators, trying to cover up who the source of the leak.
Valerie Plame, is really different.
And went to prison, and it was a low level guy, not super low. He was the chief of staff to the vice president, but it was a very clean investigation that people had. That put a lot of the politics to rest, and I think it can be done. I just know we're talking so much about this mythical prosecutor that we're not really talking much about our senators. I think the other reason Angus King might be feeling kind of good this week is to find out that he will not have Paul LePage to kick him around.
Oh, I'm sure he's happy about
over
that.
The next year. What did you make of that with the governor? Allowing it to be announced that he's not going to run?
I thought the timing of his announcement that he wasn't running for Senate and the arrival of the HHS Price and Kellyanne Conway coming to Maine, I think my prediction is that LePage is getting ready to take a job in Washington.
The Park Service?
No, that he's going to work on the health care bill. That Mike Pence mentioned that his high-risk pool was a really good idea, and that cabinet member Price was here to talk to him about health care, and LePage isn't running for senator, and that's what I think. And scary as that is,
it's so hard to separate LePage's words from his actions.
Right.
And I just find myself. First off, I'm not even sure I believe him.
That he's not running.
That he's not going to run. And I suspect that Angus King won't believe him until the deadlines have passed. But, he's obviously been looking for a job. Maybe he has one. Maybe he's moving that way. Maybe he's waiting to see if Susan Collins is going to run for governor so that he can appoint himself to Senate, which is a heck of a lot easier way to get to the Senate than having to run against Angus King. I don't know. It's I can't tell which of those scenarios.
We were batting that around earlier. I don't know that Susan Collins, if she decides to run for governor, I think she will just run, right? She'll just run for governor, right. And if she wins, then she would appoint.
No.
I don't think he.
The appointment she, as I understand it, and we have to look at it, but as I understand it, and what LePage has said is that if she wins. She immediately has to resign as a senator, or maybe she doesn't even get to resign.
The Congress convenes in December, and the new governor isn't inaugurated till January.
Well, I think.
So there's a gleam in his eye when he talks about that stuff, and it's that, well, I could end up in Washington after all as the senator from Maine. So it's hard to know.
I haven't heard any comment by LePage about this issue of a special prosecutor. But I have to go back to one quick point. You were saying the success. You were pointing out the success of the special prosecution and Valerie Plame affair.
Patrick Fitzgerald.
Oh, okay, thanks. So that is a good example. Sort of an obscure person, though, right? Like an agent, and involved a lot of like classification, and that's why this is the president of the United States. I agree that if actual evidence is demonstrated that he is compromising the investigation, that there should be perhaps a special prosecutor. I'm just saying right now, given the context that we're living in right now, that the firing of James Comey was a good thing, and that we have to wait to see who he's going to put in the FBI before we can immediately say that we need someone else. Is all I'm saying. I think
Rudy Giuliani.
The same attributes.
Would that feel you feel confident?
No, but I mean, what attributes would you want in a special prosecutor that would not
Chris
be in
Christie?
the FBI director?
Independence from the campaign, which is what's being investigated.
Right.
One.
Right.
And independence from an appointment by or having their job at the whim of the president that they're investigating. That's what I'd be looking for. And nonpartisan would be helpful.
Right. If Trump appointed somebody and then fired him, I would be very, very alarmed as well. That, oh my God, he definitely fired this person because he's investigating. But in this case, Jim Comey deserved to be fired.
Nobody's debating that.
I read a really interesting thing about Jim Comey, an analysis, and I brought it with me. The American Conservative website, which is very good, and a writer, Noah Millman, and he was saying how Comey is this victim of bipartisanship.
Please.
No, this is a guy who sees himself as above politics and an institutional figure who, if he wanted to put his thumb on the scale to help the Republicans, he couldn't have done it in a worse way. You know, he just totally embarrassed the administration. And if he wanted to be apolitical, he couldn't have done that in a worse way. I mean, everything he's done is just, it described, the image he had was of a guy who is sneaking through a house with a candle, trying to catch the robber, and ends up setting fire to the curtains and burning the whole house down.
Yeah.
And, you know, he's kind of a tragic figure because in that sense, in that his best
ego
quality
is too big.
Yeah, his ego, but you know, another way to describe his ego is this belief in his goodness, his rectitude, and that he was going to be better than all this crazy politics, and he ends up becoming this super divisive political figure.
Ego, sanctimonious, self-serving.
Yeah.
He's like everybody else in Washington. I mean, he's like no unique figure, and he's not tragic. Like he's just a
Washington used to be run by people like that.
Yeah,
like
well, see, that's the thing.
By the establishment, and now it's, you know, who knows who's in charge. We've got the craziest kind of partisans we've ever seen.
What I've heard about Comey from both sides of the aisle is that it's not that he doesn't have skills and he's blah, blah, blah. It's that he can never admit he's wrong.
Yeah.
And that to me is the scary thing. Like he can never admit that he's wrong. And that's one of the reasons why they had to take him out of the FBI. Is because if you have a guy in charge who can never admit that you're wrong when you're dealing with the election of the United States president and the investigation of the United States president, that's problematic.
That's not why they fired him.
Well, that's what the memo says.
No,
I know, but the memo is a joke.
How can you say the memo is a joke?
Because the president is a joke.
It's a spin from the administration.
Yeah.
It makes no sense at all. It is the stupidest rationale I ever heard. We fired this guy today because of what he did in the election? Come on. I know we all want him gone. That's great.
Your logic, though, is that because nobody did.
My logic is they're lying. Right. My logic is they're trying to squash the investigation. And they did this because Comey was about to testify again the next day to Congress.
I don't think there's a they there. I think that there's the president who made a decision, and then there's the FBI, the assistant attorney
because
general.
You're buying the
No, I read the memo. Actually, I read the memo.
We all read the memo.
So
you read the memo of the deputy attorney general.
Yes, I did.
Okay, so Alan, I'm just saying. I think we talked earlier that you have in the memo the deputy attorney general says he points out the infractions of the FBI policy, but he says most importantly at the end it says inability to admit that he's wrong, that's causing the public and the institution to call into question the ability to do investigation. If you don't believe what the Deputy Attorney General says, who is just confirmed by a 96 vote in the United Senate,
I don't believe what the administration says on this topic. And I'm surprised that you do.
I don't believe
it's probably the only thing they say
doesn't.
that you
It's
believe.
not. To me, believing Donald Trump isn't the point. It's not the point at all.
But it is the point. It's entirely the point. He's the one who fired this guy.
On the recommendation of the Deputy Attorney General.
Well, that's what the narrative is. That's the narrative.
But now he's backed off that. He says
how do we know that's true?
They said the recommendation had nothing to do with it, that he decided weeks ago to do it.
And what I'm saying is the recommendation in and of itself, the recommendation in and of itself, to me, is good reason that James Comey was fired. That's what I'm saying, is that there's somebody who I believe in came to the conclusion that James Comey should be fired. He came to that conclusion on May 9th,
Sessions couldn't do
and he
this
was fired.
before? Sessions couldn't come to this conclusion before?
He's already recused
Sessions,
himself.
remember, has recused himself.
That's why he couldn't come to the conclusion.
Why? It had nothing to do with the Russian investigation. Sessions hasn't recused himself from everything. He's just from one investigation.
Anyway, I mean, I think it really boils down to who do you believe?
Yeah.
And I don't believe that narrative.
Rod Rosenstein.
I think that,
That's what I believe.
if they gave that justification the first week they were in office, I'd say, okay, yeah, good move, smart.
Well, I'm gonna quash this investigation, and I'm gonna censor Cynthia, and we'll try to come back again next week.
I'm gonna write a memo.
Yeah, write a memo.
I'm gonna tear it up.
Thanks for listening to the Portland Press Herald podcast. Make sure you never miss a podcast episode by subscribing on iTunes or your favorite podcast aggregator. For more of our podcasts, visit pressherald.com/podcasts. Follow the link there to this episode to leave a comment. You can also leave a comment on our Facebook page. I'm Chad Gilley. Once again, thank you for listening to the Portland Press Herald podcast.